As I mentioned at the start of the service, Esther was one incredible woman, one of the great heroines of the Bible. Her story is long and rich, and I hope that you take the time this week as you follow your take-home insert to read it all the way through. This morning, though, I'm going to give you the Cliff's Notes version leading up to the passage that we'll read in chapter 4. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what we can learn about ourselves as we follow her great example. So Esther, I'm going to do my best to make a long story short here. Bear with me, and please, please read it this week. Here's what we need to know. Esther was an orphan, taken in by her uncle Mordecai. Mordecai worked as an advisor to the king of Persia. Esther and Mordecai were Jews, which was definitely a minority in Persia. One day, the king loses his wife, and basically he had a beauty pageant of sorts, and Esther won. So now Esther gets to be married to the king. She becomes the queen, but he does not know that she is Jewish. She has hid that from him, kept it a secret. Trouble comes when one of the king's advisors, named Haman, gets upset with the Jewish people in town who refuse to kneel and bow as Haman walks by. He had a bit of an ego. Haman convinces and bribes the king to make a decree to, and I quote from chapter 3 of Esther, give orders to destroy, to kill, and to annihilate all Jews. And not just in the capital city, but all the provinces of the Persian Empire. Now, at this time, the Jews were in exile. We've heard stories of when they had their own kings and their own cities. This is not one of those times. So they're all living under foreign governments. Many of them are living in Persia. Needless to say, this is not looking good. Esther, married to the king, who decreed that all Jews should be annihilated, not knowing that Esther was one of them. We pick up the story in chapter 4. When Mordecai, Esther's uncle, learned about all that had been done, he tore his clothes and put on sackcloth and ashes and went through the city wailing with a loud and bitter cry. In every province, wherever the king's command and his decree came, there was great mourning among the Jews. When Esther's maids and her eunuchs came and told her, the queen was deeply distressed. Then Esther called for her servant and ordered him to go to Mordecai to learn what was happening and why. The servant went out to Mordecai in the open square of the city, and Mordecai told him all that had happened and the exact sum of money that Haman had promised to pay in the king's treasuries for the destruction of the Jews. Mordecai also gave the servant a copy of the written decree issued in the capital city for the destruction of the Jews, so that the servant may show it to Esther and explain it to her, and charge her to go to the king and make supplication to him and entreat him for her people. So the servant went and told Esther what Mordecai had said. So Mordecai knows all the details before Esther does, and has her servant explain that Haman had bribed the king to wipe out the Jews. Yikes. Then Esther spoke to her servant and gave him a message to send back to Mordecai, saying, all the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces know that if any man or woman goes to the king inside the inner court without being called, there is but one law. All alike are to be put to death. Only if the king holds out the golden scepter to someone may that person live. I myself have not been called to come into the king for 30 days. She says basically, I'm really sorry, but even I can't go talk to the king. No one can go to him, even his wife, unless he invites them. Sorry, what's a girl to do? When the servant told Mordecai what Esther had said, Mordecai told him to reply to Esther, do not think that in the king's palace you will escape any more than all the other Jews. For if you keep silent at a time like this, relief and deliverance will rise from the Jews from another quarter, but you and your father's family will perish. Who knows? Perhaps you have come to royal dignity for just such a time as this. Who knows? Perhaps you have come to royal dignity for just such a time as this. Then Esther said in reply to Mordecai, go, gather all the Jews to be found in the city and hold a fast on my behalf, and neither eat nor drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my maids will also fast as you do. After that, I will go to the king, though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish." Mordecai then went away and did everything as Esther had ordered him. Now, I don't want to ruin the ending for you, and it's actually a bit of a complicated ending, but needless to say, through her courage and bravery and kindness, Queen Esther saves her people. But the question on my mind is, what does it have to do with us? Is this just some nice history lesson in church? Is it just learning about the Bible so we know what's in there? Just a chance for your pastor to wear a crown in church, which she is rather fond of? The truth is that there are so many great sermons in here, and all week I had trouble deciding how this text is going to meet us. Do I talk about the importance of speaking truth to power and standing up for the oppressed among us, which seems like a timely call? Do I talk about how we advocate for peace in the midst of hatred and misunderstanding? Or do I talk about all of the identities that compete for our attention in our day-to-day lives? Or do I talk about the importance of courage and bravery, doing hard things? Or do I talk about how we support and encourage one another, just like Mordecai did for Esther? I only mention these now so that as you read this week, which I know you're all going to do, your imagination might be sparked on some of these other paths. But here's where I landed for us today. Queen Esther, when it came right down to it, was at the right place at the right time. Perhaps you have been created for such a time as this, some translations read. Perhaps this is the moment for which you have been created. She didn't have to be anyone but herself. She didn't have to go anywhere but where she was. And while her story seems exceptional, I wonder, and honestly I believe, that this is true for us also. That to make a beautiful and meaningful difference in the world, you don't have to be anyone but who you already are. And you don't have to go anywhere but where you are. For such a time as this, today, you have been created. So the first half of that, you don't have to be anyone but who you are. I think so often we get caught up in improving ourselves and working on ourselves that we forget to live into the brilliance of who we already are. Like Michelangelo sculpting his marble statues said, "I saw the angel in the marble, and I carved until I set him free." You have that radiance within you. All of these self-improvement things are just setting it free, not an attempt to create something out of nothing. Esther was already exactly who she needed to be. Though she was an unlikely heroine, an orphan, a racial and a religious minority, a woman, her essence was perfect, absolutely perfect, and so is yours. I promise. You don't have to be anyone but who you are. You have already been uniquely designed to make a difference. And the second half of that reminder is you are already where you need to be. Now, every moment isn't going to be as massive as saving an entire race of people, and that's okay. It's probably for the best. But maybe it's when you go visit your aging parent. Maybe it's the Christmas gifts you're buying for the angel tree. Maybe it's the smiles you send to people who look a little down this time of year. Maybe it's using your voice to advocate for a cause that you really care about. Maybe it's something else that I haven't thought of, because ultimately it's exactly about who you are, where you are, and you might be the only one to see that moment. So we're going to do something a little interactive here, because while Esther was perfectly suited for her role, she had the support of her community and was clear about her goal. So we're going to do the same thing. I want you to take a minute and think about what opportunity is right in front of you, waiting for you to see it. To think about how you might be being called to move into the world with courage. Because while it can be small things, it sometimes takes a moment of reflection to see what unique opportunities are ahead of you. So take a moment and reflect. Now, you might have guessed it, I'm going to have you share. Because Esther asked for help and support from her community. By speaking your intention, you invite that encouragement and that accountability. Because while you are called to this, you are not alone. You have a whole community that is behind you, holding you up in love and support, just like Esther did. So find someone near you that you want to share your intention with, or maybe just the people in your family, whatever. You can find somebody near. So ready, set, share your opportunities. Ten-second warning. Wrap it up. I'm glad you guys are excited about this. You, yes, you, just as you are, where you are important. You matter. You make a difference. You have unique opportunities to change the world. And we are with you, cheering you on. There is a Jewish holiday called Purim that is celebrated from this story, when the Jews remember Esther's amazing act and their freedom because of it. My hope is that this story is an occasion for all of us to remember that we have been created to make good in the world, to spread peace and to bring joy, to be light in the darkness and to be hope in difficult times, to speak up for what we believe and to act boldly in a world that desperately needs our voice. Perhaps you have been created for just such a time as this. Amen.